Okay. Are we on? I believe we are on. Um, Good afternoon, everybody, um, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Ross Richardson, and I'm the director of the Pickering Regulatory Program Division at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. With me today, we have Daniel McDonald, who is a Senior Regulatory Program Officer on my team, as well as Jamie Bogdan from our Indigenous Consultation and Engagement Division. We also have Talene Kalinjian from our Waste and Decommissioning Division, as well as Melissa Fabian Mendoza from our Environmental Risk Assessment Division. So today, we're here today to provide a summary of Ontario Power Generation's license application to renew the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station and Pickering Waste Management Facility operating licenses, and their request to authorize the refurbishment of Pickering Units 5 to 8. So the purpose of this webinar really is to familiarize the public with the Pickering NGS and the Pickering Waste Management Facility. We're here to discuss the CNSC's licensing process, including providing information on how the public can participate in the upcoming public hearing. We'll discuss OPG's license application, and at the end of the presentation, we're here to answer any questions from the public that you may have. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. So of course, these sessions are intended to be a safe and respectful space where participants can ask questions. After the presentation, we encourage you to use the Q&A feature in Teams to pose any questions that you may have. Of course, we ask you to be respectful and considerate when posing your questions, and of course, that they be within the scope of this webinar. Of course, we'll do our best to answer all of your questions, but if there are any questions for which we cannot provide a substantive response today, we do commit to providing written responses at a later date. And please note that the Q&A will be moderated, so only questions and comments that align with these expectations will be approved for display for all participants. And so with that, I will pass the presentation over to Daniel McDonald. Daniel, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ross. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel McDonald, and this afternoon I'll be talking to you all about OPG's application regarding the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station and Waste Management Facility. The presentation will include a brief look at what the CNSC does, an overview of the Pickering nuclear site, highlights of OPG's application, the CNSC's consultation and engagement, and the public hearing process and timelines. Next slide, please. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, or CNSC, regulates the use of nuclear energy and materials in Canada to protect health, safety, security, and the environment. Next slide, please. The CNSC is dedicated to protecting the health, safety, and security of all people in Canada, as well as the environment, through independent, transparent, and efficient regulatory oversight of Canada's nuclear sector. This also includes implementing Canada's international commitments on the peaceful use of nuclear energy in collaboration with domestic and international partners, disseminating objective scientific, technical, and regulatory information, and strengthening confidence through open communication and engagement to build and foster trusted relationships with Indigenous nations and other communities in Canada and globally. Next slide, please. Licensing decisions of the CNSC are made by an independent commission made up of a panel of experts, which is arm's length from government. The commission has up to 7 members at any given time, and they are appointed by Governor and Council based on their qualifications and expertise. The current members of the commission are shown on this slide. The commission makes decisions transparently, guided by clear rules of procedure. Interested parties and members of the public are able to participate in public commission hearings, which are webcast live and often held in facility host communities, to make them as accessible as possible to local residents. The Commission provides extensive reasons for its decisions, which are based on information and evidence that includes public input, as well as the recommendations of expert CNSC staff. Decisions, hearing transcripts, webcast archives, and other documentation are publicly available on the CNSC website. The Commission is supported by CNSC staff. Next slide, please. CNSC staff include over 800 scientific, technical, and subject matter professionals, some of whom are here today. This includes roughly 20 professionals located in Ottawa and on-site who are dedicated full-time to the regulatory oversight of the Pickering nuclear site. CNSC staff support the Commission by implementing Commission decisions, developing regulatory requirements, recommendations, and guidance, verifying and enforcing licensee compliance, and engaging with the public and Indigenous nations and communities. CNSC staff do not make licensing decisions. Instead, we provide information and recommendations to the Commission as part of a public hearing. Next slide, please. The Pickering nuclear site is located in the province of Ontario on the north shore of Lake Ontario, in the city of Pickering and the regional municipality of Durham, and lies within the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Anishinaabe people. These lands are covered by the Williams Treaties between Canada and the Mississauga and Chippewa nations. The site lies 32 kilometers northeast of downtown Toronto and 21 kilometers southwest of Oshawa. The facility is owned and operated by Ontario Power Generation Incorporated, also known as OPG. Next slide, please. The Pickering Nuclear Generating Station includes 8 CANDU nuclear power reactor units and their associated equipment. These units first came online between 1971 and 1982 and are designed to provide roughly 516 megawatts of electricity each. Units 2 and 3 have been maintained in a state of storage with surveillance since 2010. Units 1 and 4 permanently shut down in 2024 and are currently defueled and dewatered and awaiting the transition to a storage with surveillance state within the next 2 or 3 years. Units 5 and 8 are currently operating and are authorized to continue operations until the end of 2026. The current 10-year operating license for the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station is valid until August 2028. Next slide, please. The Pickering Waste Management Facility is also located on the Pickering nuclear site. The facility stores nuclear waste produced at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. It is made up of 2 phases, called Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 includes a processing building and the 2 dry storage buildings for used fuel. Phase 2 includes 2 more dry storage buildings and dry storage modules that contain components from past retube activities, as well as the currently under construction 5th dry storage building and the Pickering component storage structure, which will be used to store future decommissioning and refurbishment waste. The Pickering Waste Management Facility is licensed under a separate 10-year operating license that is also valid until August 2028. Next slide, please. As mentioned, Units 1 to 4 are all permanently shut down, and certain limited scope decommissioning activities are already underway at the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station. OPG submitted a detailed decommissioning plan in 2024 that described a limited scope of risk reduction activities related to Units 1 to 4. This includes the removal of non-nuclear structures, systems, and components. CNSC staff found that the limited scope of activities described in this plan fall within the current operating license and accepted OPG's detailed decommissioning plan in 2025. OPG has since started some of the described work and is required to update its detailed decommissioning plan at least every 5 years. Decommissioning of nuclear structures, systems, and components, such as the reactors themselves, will require the authorization of the Commission following a public Commission hearing where members of the public have an opportunity to intervene. Such activities are not part of OPG's current application and are not planned to commence during the proposed license period. Next slide, please. On the next few slides, I will go over OPG's application to request authorization to refurbish Units 5 to 8 for continued operation and renew the operating licenses of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station and Waste Management Facility. Next slide, please. OPG applied to the CNSC on June 27, 2025. OPG's application requests authorization to refurbish Pickering Nuclear Generating Station Units 5 to 8 for continued operation, early renewal of the operating licenses of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station and Waste Management Facility for a 10-year license period that would start January 1st, 2027, consolidation of the nuclear generating station and waste management facility into a single operating license, and other minor amendments, such as removal of license conditions that are no longer relevant or relate to completed obligations. Next slide, please. To support its application, OPG has also provided a predictive environmental risk assessment and climate change resilience assessment. The predictive environmental risk assessment evaluates the environmental risks associated with the planned activities at the Pickering site, including refurbishment of units 5 to 8, operation of the nuclear generating station and waste management facility, and decommissioning of units 1 to 4. The climate change resilience assessment is focused on the nuclear generating station and identified climate change related hazards and how they could potentially impact the station. CNSC staff's assessment of these documents will be discussed during the upcoming hearing. Next slide, please. The focus of OPG's application is the proposed refurbishment of units 5 to 8. Units 5 to 8 are all planned to shut down in September 2026, and the proposed refurbishment would occur between 2027 and 2034. As each unit's refurbishment is completed, the units will be returned to service. The units are planned to be refurbished in sequence, and Unit 5 is expected to return to service in the 2030-2031 timeframe, and Units 6 through 8 in subsequent years, with the project planned to conclude in 2034. The main scope of OPG's proposed refurbishment is the replacement of major reactor components, such as fuel channels, feeder pipes, and steam generators, as well as the construction of a new deep water intake. The steam generators would be craned through openings constructed in the roof of the reactor buildings, while other components will be removed through existing access points. The deep water intake is planned to be a 1.5 kilometer long tunnel that will run under the lake to access deeper lake water. It is expected to reduce impacts to fish and improve cooling performance. An authorization from Fisheries and Oceans Canada is required prior to performing any construction activities in the lake. Next slide, please. On this slide, some further refurbishment highlights are listed. This is not an exhaustive list, and OPG will conduct other maintenance and repair activities as necessary during the proposed refurbishment. Next slide, please. OPG is also currently conducting a periodic safety review to support the proposed refurbishment and continued operation of Units 5 to 8. A PSR is a comprehensive evaluation of the design, condition, and operation of a nuclear power plant against modern codes and standards. Conclusions and recommendations to enhance the safety of the plant are expected to be provided to CNSC staff for approval by the end of 2027. OPG is planning to implement these safety enhancements during the proposed license period. Next slide, please. Should the Commission authorize the refurbishment of Units 5 to 8, CNSC staff would maintain regulatory oversight of the refurbishment project to verify that all regulatory requirements continue to be met by OPG. CNSC staff on-site inspectors will continue to perform inspections, monitor the conduct of licensed activities, and follow up on events as necessary. Additionally, technical specialists from various scientific and engineering disciplines will review regulatory submissions to verify that the project is conducted in accordance with requirements. Next slide, please. Oversight of OPG's proposed refurbishment project, CNSC staff will recommend that the Commission include 4 regulatory hold points. These hold points would align with OPG's return to service plan milestones and must be removed prior to OPG continuing the project. These 4 recommended hold points are prior to loading fuel in the reactors, prior to removal of the guaranteed shutdown state, prior to exceeding 1% full power, prior to exceeding 65% full power. Only the Commission or a person authorized by the Commission can remove a regulatory hold point. Next slide, please. I will now pass the presentation over to Jamie Bogdan to discuss the CNSC's consultation and engagement processes.
Thank you, Daniel. Next slide, please. In addition to technical safety and control areas, the CNSC also considers Indigenous engagement and consultation. As an agent of the Crown and as Canada's nuclear regulator, the CNSC recognizes and understands the importance of consulting and building relationships with Indigenous nations and communities. The CNSC aims to lead a flexible and coordinated whole-of-government approach to improve the effectiveness of engagement and consultation, and remains committed to working with interested Indigenous nations and communities to continue improving our approach to consultation and engagement. The CNSC requires licensees to engage with Indigenous nations and communities early in the development and throughout the life of projects. Furthermore, CNSC invites Indigenous peoples to participate throughout the licensing and lifecycle regulation of nuclear projects through methods such as regulatory reviews, hearing participation, and various opportunities to discuss and share any project-specific concerns or impacts. Ultimately, CNSC's goal is to build positive, meaningful, long-term relationships with the Indigenous nations and communities in Canada. Next slide, please. In order to support public engagement and Indigenous consultation, the CNSC maintains a participant funding program, or PFP. This funding assists Indigenous nations and communities, as well as members of the public, to participate in the regulatory process and provide helpful information to the Commission. The CNSC has made funding available through the PFP to support participation in the review and CNSC hearing of OPG's application to refurbish Units 5 through 8 and renewal of the operating licenses of the Pickering Nuclear Generating Station and Waste Management Facility. The CNSC awarded over $343,000 to applicants for this matter. Next slide, please. I will now pass the presentation back to Daniel MacDonald to discuss the next steps in the CNSC hearing process.
Thank you, Jamie. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of where we are currently in the CNSC's hearing process. CNSC staff are finalizing the assessment of OPG's application, including requests for further information. CNSC staff's Commission Member Document, or CMD, will be completed in May and will include information on OPG's application, including the proposed refurbishment project, the results of CNSC staff's assessment of the application, including overall conclusions and recommendations to the Commission, a consultation report summarizing consultation efforts to date with Indigenous nations and communities, other information, or on matters of regulatory interest. Further, CNSC staff continue to collaborate with Fisheries and Oceans Canada regarding the deepwater intake and consultation with Indigenous nations and communities. Next slide, please. Some of the important dates are highlighted on this slide. On May 15th, 2026, the CNSC staff CMD will be available upon request and on the CNSC website shortly after. On June 23rd, 2026, the CNSC will hold Part 1 of the public hearing in Gatineau, Quebec. On August 12th, 2026, any public interventions are due to the registry, and October 5th, 2026, the CNSC will hold Part 2 of the public hearing in Ajax, Ontario, over multiple days during that week. Next slide, please. The CNSC published a revised notice of public hearing on January 22nd, 2026. Part 1 and Part 2 of the public hearing regarding OPG's application will be webcast live on the CNSC website and available as an archive afterwards. As noted on the previous slide, interventions are due by August 12th, 2026. Requests to intervene, either orally or in writing, can be made using the online request form or by contacting the registry at the contact information listed on the slide. If you'd like to intervene or have further questions on the Commission proceeding, please contact the Commission registry using this contact information. This concludes our presentation. Next slide, please. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar. We're happy to answer any questions you may have using the Microsoft Teams Q&A feature. If we don't have an answer for you today, we will make sure to reach out with further information. So over to everyone for any questions.
Great. Thanks very much, Daniel and Jamie. Much appreciated. So we've now moved into the Q&A portion of the webinar. So as Daniel mentioned, if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat through the Q&A function. While we wait for our first question, I just wanted to mention as well that OPG's license application is publicly available. It's on OPG's website. It's also available on the CNSC website. So that is open to the public. As well, OPG has also posted revision 0 of their predictive environmental risk assessment. So that is also publicly available, as well as a summary of their climate resilience assessment. So I'm just going to see here if something through the chat. Okay, here we go. We do have a question from Chris. Is the deep water intake also an outfall? Is this a separate project or part of the refurb application? So do you want to go with that one, Daniel, or do you want me to start?
Sure.
Or it's up to you? What do you?
I'll give it a go. The deep water intake itself is considered part of the refurbishment project as far as the CNSC is concerned. Authorization to refurbish includes the deep water intake. It is only an intake. The outfall that currently exists at the site isn't expected to be modified, at least not at this time. OPG hasn't requested any of that. Ross, did you have anything to add?
Nope, I was going to say the exact same thing. Yeah, it's good. Thanks for the question, Chris. Just waiting to see if we have any more questions coming through the chat. I'm just trying to think, Daniel, if there's anything else we can convey in terms of public participation. But as mentioned, we're trying to do provide as much information as we can to the public in advance of the hearing, and of course, we encourage everyone to participate in the public hearing coming up in the fall. So we'll just wait a few more minutes here. Oh, here we go. Another one from Chris. That's good. Okay. Your consultation summary only spoke of Indigenous consultation. What about consultation with host community regions? Okay. That's more of public consultation. Jamie, do you want to start at least with the Indigenous piece, and then I can speak a little bit more on the public consultation part.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can share just a broad overview of the work we've done. So on this, since we received the application, we notified Indigenous nations and communities in the area, or nations and communities that had expressed interest in the past. And we've continued to share any updates we get or information that is requested. And we do meet regularly with the nations and communities that we have established relationships with, and are open to meeting with anybody who's interested to get more information. And as Ross mentioned, that isn't my wheelhouse. That public communication is another team. So I'll hand that back to you, Ross, to speak about
maybe
the work that was done there.
I'll speak to that. I just at a high level. So of course, outreach is of importance to us, and that's part of the reason why we're having this webinar to communicate, about the hearing and about opportunities for public participation. That is an aspect of our regulatory oversight as well. We do have a specific license condition on public information and disclosure. So we do expect the licensee, in this case OPG, to also do its own due diligence in terms of informing the public of what's happening at that particular site. Daniel, did you want to say something as well on this one?
No, I think that covers it. There's also the hearing process has public outreach. The public notices were sent out to members of the public, informing them of when the hearing was going to be. This forms part of our public outreach as well, this webinar. And then throughout the hearing process, we'll keep members of the local community informed how to participate and what they can do to watch and so forth.
Yeah, and then on the next question as well, I see from Chris about what difference would the consolidated license mean for the public in terms of common waste management issues? my view is will make no difference in terms of the license, whether it's separate licenses or a single license. So I don't believe it would make any difference in terms of the public commenting on waste issues. I would say it actually will help this in terms of when we had two different licenses, we were split, and so we would talk about the waste facility, and we weren't talking about the station, and when we were talking about the station, we weren't talking about the waste facility. Now we're talking about both in an integrated fashion as a single site. So I think in terms of the consolidation may actually assist in that regard in terms of the public commenting on waste management issues. I don't know, Dan, if you had anything else to add on that.
No, I think that sums it up effectively. There will be no change to licensing basis. There'll be no change to CNSC oversight by consolidating licenses. And further, Chris, to your question about the municipalities, the CNSC does speak, like we do go to the Durham, which Ross, maybe you know more. The Nuclear Health Committee. Yeah, we do present there. We keep them apprised of the licensing status. The actual activities of OPG site, OPG attends those meetings regularly to inform the public and the municipalities of what's happening. Recently, the CNSC chaired the potassium iodide pill working group with municipalities. So we do work with the municipalities to make sure they're informed.
Yeah, and I would also say too that if we do get a request from the specific municipalities to come speak to them about the station, by all means, we are ready and willing to speak to them as well if available, and we're available upon request at any time. Just go to the next question. Oh, we got a couple more. Sorry, I'm going to back up. Oh, we got lots now. Okay, here we go. All right.
So Ross, I just published one there from Aman. If you want to read it.
Oh, okay. For the whole points, what key documentation is required from the licensee for release approval, and what lessons from Darlington are being applied to Pickering? Okay. Well, do you want to start with that one, Daniel, and I can supplement? Because this is a very robust process. We're very familiar with it through the Darlington refurbishment that's just been recently completed. So as you know, for the whole points, there were 4 whole points per unit times 4. There were 16 whole points for Darlington, and of course we have the Bruce MCR as well. In terms of the specific documentation, that is all documented in the Associated License Condition Handbook, and it provides essentially explicit prerequisites on what needs to be completed in terms of the commissioning and turnover before progressing to the next phase or before releasing the whole point. It's a very robust process that requires extensive work from OPG, but also extensive work from CNSC staff as well. Very familiar with the process, evenings, weekends spent on that. And in terms of lessons learned for Darlington being applied to Pickering, absolutely. And from the OPG perspective, I don't want to speak for OPG, but they're literally, hundreds or thousands of lessons learned that they've documented. In some cases, it's the same people or the same contractors doing the work. So that's obviously of assistance when you have all of that operational experience just being moved from Darlington just down the 401 to Pickering. And then from the regulatory perspective as well, yeah, absolutely. Daniel, myself, and team, we're working closely with our colleagues from the Darlington Regulatory Program Division and the Bruce Regulatory Program Division to ensure those lessons learned gets captured. One specifically I have in mind now is to essentially have our compliance approach ready to go well in advance, so that if and when refurbishment does get approved, the compliance aspect, our compliance efforts can start immediately. And so early planning, early engagement is key. Daniel, anything else you want to comment on lessons learned specifically?
I think that mostly covers it. I think our regulatory approach will mirror what's been done with Darlington and with Bruce for their refurbishment and major component replacement projects. The same number of whole points will be implemented. So we expect that we'll be applying lessons learned as well. And this isn't the first time that we've overseen a project like this. So.
No, absolutely not. Yeah, and with Bruce ongoing as well, Darlington, there's the LaPro experience too. There's lots of experience being gained on this.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a question there from Isa.
Yeah, I'll speak to that. So it was mentioned that units 1 and 4 will not be part of the current refurbishment license renewal. Are there any plans for any of those units to come back online? No plans for them to come back online from our perspective. So as mentioned, those units 2 and 3 have been in safe store since 2010. Units 1 and 4 are defueled, dewatered. So as far as the CNSC staff is aware, there are no plans to bring those units back online. I can't speak for OPG, but in terms of the CNSC perspective, we have not received any indication that those stations are going to be brought back.
Quite the opposite, really, because OPG has provided us with their detailed decommissioning plan, and they've outlined pretty extensively the plan to disassemble and decommission those units. So at this point, it's quite unlikely that they would change their mind on that. If they were to change their mind, it would require commission authorization for sure. So were OPG to decide in the future to rebuild those units, it would be a public hearing, just like this one.
Yeah, absolutely. And as mentioned, in some cases, some of the non-nuclear on the components on the secondary side are being removed. And so to reverse that decision would be very costly. So highly unlikely. And like Daniel said, we have the plans in place now that we have no indication that they're going to bring those units back. Okay, I'm just looking here.
So that's all. There's one.
Oh, there's another one.
Like that one from Leanna.
Yep. So what volume of additional used fuel and other waste is anticipated if the units are refurbished and continue to operate? And where will that waste be stored? Yeah, I'll start on these in terms of the storage piece, but the actual waste volumes, I will ask Talene if she may not be able to have detailed numbers, but I can at least speak to it at a high level. So in terms of the used nuclear fuel, those will continue to be stored on site at the Pickering Waste Management Facility. So they are constructing a new Pickering used fuel dry storage building 5 on site. So all of the used nuclear fuel will continue to be stored on site. And then in terms of the refurbishment waste, there is a specific waste building also being constructed presently called the Pickering Component Storage Structure. And the refurbishment waste will be stored in that particular building. And so this will be the retube waste, essentially, the used fuel channels, retube waste components, as well as the steam generators. And I think, Talene, I don't know if you want to speak to this in terms of the volumes. I don't know if we have that specific numbers.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do not have the numbers. But what I can say is if OPG requires storage capacity beyond what is already authorized in their license, then a license amendment would be required.
I think the one thing we can say is that it will be commensurate with the currently generated volume of waste per unit. So there's not going to be additional activities. They'll continue operating and using fuel at a similar rate that they're currently using it.
Yeah. And thanks very much, Talene. Appreciate that.
And another question from Chris on decommissioning. Is decommissioning a different process than disassembling the unused reactors? Decommissioning is a broad process. So disassembling the reactors is part of decommissioning. What we regulatorily refer to as the execution of decommissioning is quite a long process that starts relatively early. It starts with the entering of storage with surveillance, and it has different parts within it. So the units themselves will be decommissioned as part of decommissioning much farther down the line. What OPG is doing right now is maintaining these units in a safe state and taking apart non-nuclear parts of the reactors. But certainly the disassembling of the unused reactors will be part of decommissioning in the future, though.
Yeah, and the only other comment I would make is the CNSC, so CNSC, we do have a reg doc, regulatory document 211.2 that is available on the CNSC's public website if you wanted to find out more about the CNSC's requirements for decommissioning. They are publicly available on our website. And again, the reg doc number is 211.2. And this is the reg doc that we hold OPG to account in terms of meeting its requirements. So I just wanted to mention that as well.
Yeah. And Ross has another one there for Chris, from Chris.
Oh, okay. Should we assume this new waste will be there forever? If not, how long? So the so the current planning assumption is that no, the Pickering, in terms of the used fuel, those are interim storage facilities. They're not intended to be there permanently. The intent is that all of the used fuel will eventually be transported to the Deep Geologic Repository, which is a separate project being led through the Nuclear Waste Management Organization. And so the current planning assumption is once the DGR is ready to accept fuel, this irradiated fuel will be transferred from the Pickering site to the DGR site. So the planning assumption is no, it's an interim storage, it's not a disposal site, it's a storage site. And in terms of timeframes, I don't have that at the top of my head, but perhaps that's something we can get in terms of the DGR planning assumption when that project will be ready. Okay. All right. Just looking here. It's going to say. So thank you. I'm just looking at monitoring the chat here.
We'll give everyone a chance to ask more questions if you'd like.
Yeah, we'll give it another minute or so. And if not, we can close early if that's not an issue. Just give it another minute.
And a reminder, if anyone does have questions later, you can always send an email to the info line there's a link to the email on CNSC's website. That'll get to us through communications. So we're happy to answer questions anytime.
Absolutely.
Oh, there's a couple.
All right.
Kelly, when are intervention submissions due? The intervention deadline is currently August 12th, 2026. So in the summertime, it's possible that that's flexible or could change. That's up to the registry, but for now, August 12th.
A few more published here. Let's just go through them one at a time. So you talked to, okay, Kelly's question has been answered. How have the assumptions of moving the waste worked out so far from the NGO plant starting in 1972? Oh, well, I wouldn't say I have that background in terms of the historical context but the planning assumption has always been, at least for Pickering, that the used nuclear fuel would never be disposed of. It was always the planning assumption that the used nuclear fuel would be interim storage facility, and that would be subject to transportation to a DGR. But I can't comment on like specific dates and things of that nature. Obviously, the DGR is a separate project than what we're talking about here. But again, like I said, the Pickering Waste Management Facility has always been the planning assumption a storage facility, not a disposal facility. So we'll go to the next question. Will a copy of the presentation be made available? I don't see why not. I think the answer is yes, absolutely.
We'll make sure that there's a copy available for everyone. Certainly the webinar will be posted. We'll have a PDF or a PowerPoint file as well.
The next question is, how are PSR findings integrated into refurbishment, and where can we access CNC documents for further details? So, well, our CMD, which will be made available or public on May 15th, will have that information in terms of what we've assessed as part of the PSR. But essentially the PSR, at the end of the PSR, which is what's called an integrated implementation plan, which essentially captures the regulatory scope of refurbishment, or the list of safety improvements that OPG would be required to implement during the next license period. So that is essentially, so it's the IIP is the final deliverable, if you will, of the PSR process, which contains, as I mentioned, all of the safety improvements that OPG will be required to implement. But in terms of our review of the PSR, so this will be documented in our commission member document that will be coming forthcoming. So stay tuned for that. It will be made available, and it will be published on the CNSC website. So just moving up here.
Amon's question about where to ask questions. I posted the email for the CNSC info line in the chat there, so you can respond there. That email is in the contact page on the CNSC website. Just flag the subject as being about Pickering, and those questions would get to us.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. Oh, I see it there. Perfect. Okay. Have we caught up? I think we caught up. There was a flurry of questions there. I think we're good. Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. No, appreciate the input. We'll just wait a few more minutes here. Oh, there you go. Stephanie put it in there as well. That's great. Yeah, happy to answer any questions on Pickering for sure. Don't see any more posts. Maybe we'll give out one more minute, and then we may just we may call it an afternoon. In the meantime, again, we really appreciate the everyone's participation and interest in the project, and again, encourage everyone to participate in the public hearings and the information. We'll get the slide presentation to everyone, to all the participants today. Don't see any more questions in the chat, so I think perhaps we will call it. I'm always hesitant to call it because as soon as I do, some of the question will pop up. Okay, I think we're going to call it then. Like I said, appreciate everyone's participation in today's webinar. As Daniel mentioned, there is the info line in terms of if you had any further questions, please reach out directly to the info line. And with that, we will call it an afternoon. Again, thanks everyone for your participation, and have a great rest of the day. Take care, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Have a nice afternoon.